Welcome to Alley Chats. I'm your host, Rob Southgate. Alley Chats is a virtual artist alley featuring interviews with artists, filmmakers, podcasters, writers, really any creative person you might find at a pop culture convention. My goal is to help draw attention to cool people and to hopefully help them get some new fans. I want this podcast to raise up these amazing people and to inspire you, the listener, to chase your dreams as well. You can follow Alley Chats on Facebook and join the conversation. I'll add more social media in the future, but for now, that's the best place to interact with me. You can also email me directly if you would like to be a guest or have a guest suggestion. My email is rob@smgpods.com. Today's guest is Andrew Najberg. He's a horror author, a poet, a teacher, and the senior editor of Symposium magazine. And he's a guest at the Books and Brews event coming up this August 3rd in Evanston, Illinois. There's a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. Anyway, here's Andrew. Andrew, I am really excited to talk to you today. As you know, because we've already been talking, Andrew is another author that's going to be at Books and Brews at the Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois on August 3rd. I should say the year too, because this is evergreen, 2024. But it's Books and Brews. It's going to be a great event. There's like 50 authors there, and Andrew is one of them. Andrew, thank you for coming on. I'll put all the information in the show notes so it makes it easy for people. We don't have to say it 100 times. I'll do that with your social media as well, so we don't have to spend an hour on that. Let's just get into the meat of it. Andrew, tell people who you are. Give them a little backstory about you.
All right. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. My name is Andrew Najberg, and I'm an author and a teacher, and I teach for the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, mostly at this point, creative writing, Japanese literature. I've been working to be an author for, since I was a kid. I actually started writing short fiction and screenplays and things like that when I was about third grade. And, really, it's just something I'd always wanted to do. During college, I finally managed to convince myself that I could actually do it for a living. And so I switched over to a creative writing major from computer science. And this point, I've got two masters in creative writing. One's an MA in English, and then the other's an MFA, actually in poetry, of all things.
Cool.
I actually spent from about 2002 to about 2018 almost exclusively publishing poetry. I had about 80 magazine publications at that point, and then finally a poetry collection that came out in 2021. But I never really found a readership in poetry, and I'd been sort of secretly writing novels and pretty much just shelving them in my closets. I actually had just a row of manuscripts back there, a couple of which are still back there and will never emerge. I just very abruptly started having quite a bit of success landing manuscripts, and my first novel, The Mobius Door, came out in April 23, and since then I've had two more novels come out. Got a collection of short stories due out in November, and then I got one more novel already written and signed and ready for editing, and then I've got contracts signed on two more novels forthcoming.
That is absolutely awesome news. You mentioned Mobius Door. So when I was looking you up and I was looking at your books, my brain exploded because that concept is one that I absolutely love. In fact, I met an author from a TTRPG. She writes for TTRPGs that we just started talking about paranormal stuff and horror stuff. She loves horror. And she says, you know about the doors in the woods? And I was like, yeah, I've heard about this thing. Oh yeah, I saw one when I was a kid. I know she had this whole crazy story. It involved other people. It wasn't just her. And she was like, this is one of the reasons I went into what I went into. And then I saw your book and I'm like, oh yeah, I think I need to read it and I need to send her a link because she needs to read this because how cool. It just kind of ignites the imagination, which is something I love. Is horror, I mean, you were doing poetry and poetry can be in whatever genre. Is horror novels, is that really where you want to stay? Or are you like, no, I write everything, or is it horror is kind of the thing?
So I would definitely say that I have a lot of themes in common across my work, but so far my novels, I think, have been pretty different. They all deal with themes like interdimensionality, about identity, about human nature, and things like that. But the Mobius door I'd probably describe as, traditional small town New England horror with a bit of a parallel universe, multi-dimensional bend to it. So there's a science fiction touch to an otherwise traditional horror story. Galatok is bleak post-apocalyptic island horror. It's set about 40 years after a nuclear exchange in Europe and the United States, and it's well after society has reconstructed. So it's a lot more dystopian, and it's got this sort of what I like to call sort of an old Soviet bloc feel.
Yeah.
It was largely inspired by my Croatian heritage and my experiences traveling there, like hearing about local history, learning about my family history as well. Then Neverborn Thief, which came out in March, is a dark portal fantasy story that was inspired by things like Coraline by Neil Gaiman, the Graveyard Book. Thief of Always was a really big influence on it by Clive Barker. Of course, C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia, things like that as well. That idea of a kid stepping into an alternate world. My collection of short stories is a pretty wide mix of science fiction, horror, and magical realism. Then I have a science fiction novel coming out in May next year. It's set in orbit primarily in an eco-dystopian future. And then I am actually returning to post-apocalyptic here pretty soon with the book I have currently underway. But overall, though, what I really do is I'm a huge reader in the sciences and in things like paranormal fables, mythologies, and things like that. And so, what I'm really doing here is, I'll read papers on science. So I'll be reading things about how we build a space station in zero G with simulated gravity, or I'll be reading about some sort of theory about holes in quantum foam that would allow us to send information from one dimension to another. Or I'll be doing some research into, kind of forgotten folk myths of Eastern Europe. And once I settle on a topic I'm really interested in from these more sort of, real world researches, I then
Right.
start to construct a story around them. I think I would probably attribute a lot of this approach to growing up reading things like, especially Michael Crichton. Later on, getting interested in Douglas and Preston and Child, I should say. There's really that combination of thriller with an informational base underneath them. So, you know, uh, Galatok, for example, was just an excuse for me to talk about some of Eastern Europe's historical buried atrocities, as well as some theories on non-carbon-based life forms and things like that, and just sort of merge them into a single narrative form that would hopefully engage readers through the experience of learning just enough about these things to maybe do a bit more research on their own.
Want more shows like this? We've got a lot more on the Southgate Media Group Patreon page. Some free, some paid. Plus, there's exclusive content for subscribers only. Follow the link in the show notes or look up Southgate Media Group on Patreon and check out the cool stuff we're doing over there. You won't be sorry. On August 3rd, 2024, Books of Horror is presenting Books and Brews at Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois. There will be over 40 horror authors for a book signing and meetup from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. that day. Meet your favorite authors, discover new authors, meet Books of Horror friends in real life, including the author I'm talking with on this podcast. Oh, and I'll be there too. This is an all-ages event. Food, alcohol, and non-alcoholic beverages will be available. No outside food or drinks will be allowed. Search for Books of Horror Presents Books and Brews on Facebook events for more information, or click on the link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. It's funny because I usually shoot from the hip on these things, but I have a bunch of questions that I kind of prepared. I figured, hey, I want to be prepared once in a while. It's been 11 years of podcasting. You think I'd pick up on this? You blew it. Half my questions you just answered in that little thing. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are based on some of the things that I wrote down for myself, and because what you were saying uh, makes me want to go in a different direction here.
All right.
So first of all, uh, let's take the label off. I'm going to say horror, but let's take the label off because I think that the labels trip us up a little bit. You're talking about, you know, post-apocalyptic. There's terror out of space. There's all these different. If we just throw a big horror or genre umbrella over it, I think we're going to be better off here.
Mhm.
So, what has writing genre taught you about your world? Can you, or about yourself? Can you find something in there?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different things that I can kind of branch off with that. I think the biggest though would be, I have discovered a couple of things about myself through writing this. One is that, and this is actually kind of comes as well from just family conversations and stuff like that. But there are a few things that I fear more than things like Alzheimer's and dementia, and losing oneself and losing one's ability to differentiate reality from illusion or fantasy. Um, all of my work definitely plays with that line between sort of self and external world. And so in Mobius store, there's a lot of corruptions of the world. And at the same time, though, and that book's been long enough out that I'm not worried about spoilers. But one thing that all of the deaths in that story has in common is that the characters are always undone by their best intentions.
Mhm.
Very few characters are sort of overtly killed by this sort of malevolent force that's entering into their world. Instead, they put themselves into the path of death by making poor choices that look like the right choices at the time. The example I like to use is one of my favorite sequences is about midway through the book. The narrative has been tracking this police officer character for a considerable length, and his uh, his girlfriend gets stranded in this cloud of darkness that's been spreading across the town. She's in her vehicle, so she's ostensibly somewhat protected from immediate contact with it. And he manages to establish contact with her through an emergency CB radio he'd insisted she keep in her trunk. And when she finally gets it, he manages to connect with her. And he knows that her situation is growing increasingly dire inside the vehicle. And he ends up making what is essentially a nearly blind charge into this completely black, opaque
Ooh,
cloud in order to attempt to rescue her. And
that
you
alone
know,
is
it's
scary. Like just hearing that, I'm getting like, oh boy, okay, very uncomfortable.
and Oh yeah, and that's part of it too, is stripping people away of the things that bring us security and comfort, visibility, the ability to see, all that kind of stuff. And but yeah, I mean, basically it's a doomed mission. I mean, he's literally running into blackness with
Right.
only a vague sense of direction about where to go. He doesn't know her exact location, so he has no way of getting to her, but he's just operating purely on hope and good intentions. And obviously that doesn't turn out well for him, and a lot of the deaths turn out that way, where the characters find themselves driven into this darkness by hoping to save people, or hoping to make things better for people, or hoping to make themselves better. And So yeah, things like that have been, and of course, I like to think I'm a pretty decent person. I know I have a reputation for being, a nice guy on social media and stuff, but I'm always worried about doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. That's, I think I'm helping somebody, and I end up stepping forward and just causing one hell of a mess. I have kids, and I mean, what bigger fear is there when you're raising children, when you're earnestly trying to raise them in a way you think is good, trying to hope to make them into good people. And I mean, for all you know, maybe you're making the decision that cause, or that maybe you're the influence that will ultimately cause them to ruin their own life for reasons that you can't yet predict.
Yeah, the butterfly of the parent butterfly effect. Oh,
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, yeah, a lot of these questions come up throughout my work. And similarly, I have also noticed that I do have a real interest in writing child protagonists as well.
Hmm.
At this point, including my work in progress, three of the novels are focused on child characters, with two books focused on adult characters. So right now, for example, the book I'm writing is focuses on a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old girl who are locked in a bunker underneath their parents' house for reasons that they don't know. And their
I'm
parents,
sure they're good, legitimate reasons. Come on. Good,
and
good parents.
but the kids have no idea why it's happened. All
Right.
they know is that there appears to have been some sort of cataclysm. But ultimately, the narrative is about exploring their relationship with each other and
Yeah.
how they're trying to help each other survive through a horrific ordeal. And I did grow up with I grew up with the sister. She's absolutely fabulous, and we've had our ups and downs as siblings, of course. But I think we've, especially growing up, we had a great relationship, and we've got a really good relationship now. But I know that that's something that's also fueled a lot of my writing is, thinking back, we grew up in a very tense household. And so, I do spend a lot of time working with characters that have navigated difficult or challenging home environments and catastrophes, etc.
Sure, sure. So, okay, this is more of a writing question.
Mhm.
I think this will work. You're a professor. What qualities, forget genre, what qualities do you think make a good short story?
Oh, that's a fun one. So I do love writing short fiction, and I love teaching it as well. And so a couple of things that are actually pretty simple at the core of it for me, at least what I like to write and read. One, I do really like a character that has a clear central drive. If I feel like the protagonist in a novel, you have the time to kind of get to feel to get the feel of the nuance and the complexities of a character's psyche. You can explore them in a kind of psychological depth that short stories struggle to present on the same level. So I do tend to find the ability to connect to a narrator or protagonist in a short story is greatly enhanced by a fairly clear and recognizable desire. Now, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. They don't need to be avenging their father's death or something like that. It could just be that, maybe they just want to get a better job. It can be really, really simple. But similarly, though, I do think that short fiction benefits from highly recognizable emotional stakes. If the stakes aren't there, if we don't understand why the emotional consequences of what's happening matter, we're not going to invest in it rapidly enough and sufficiently enough to really care about the story. So,
Yeah.
we can have a lot of plot in a short story, but I find that short stories with big plots, with unrecognizable character emotions, tend to flounder. They tend to feel, informational, like you're reading a Wikipedia article of the story instead of actually engaging in a narrative experience. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the core of it to me, is that I think short fiction has this really remarkable ability to bring us in and out of a narrative experience with ease and rapidity. That we read it in one sitting, so we don't have that disruption that comes from closing a novel with a bookmark in it. Instead, we tend to experience the whole story at once and to
Right.
process it immediately. And so, just for example, in the short story collection I've got coming out, I do have a lot of fantastical premises. Like I said, I write science fiction, I write magical realism, and I write horror. So one of my favorite pieces in it, though, is called The Robots Inside Us. And I had this idea that came from a drawing I did a long time ago of this town that has a window that looks into another dimension, and it's kind of just sort of in the middle of their town square. And inside that other dimension, what they see is that it's this big chamber full of machinery, and there's this robot moving throughout it, repairing the machinery and itself as it goes. And its motives are inscrutable. You don't know what it's trying to repair or why. You don't know if there's consequences, whether or not if it fails in its task. You don't know if it's aware or if it's just a pure program. And so I had this backdrop or this idea that I wanted to explore, because I think there's intellectually some interesting ramifications or questions we can ask about it. But that being said, I also didn't think that that was really a story. It's a premise. And, sure, it leads to some events. It has its own progression, but at the same time, no reader can emotionally invest themselves in what's happening on that side of the window. So I decided that I needed a lens through which to present it. And so I invented a narrative of a mother and her daughter walking home through the square, kind of casually stopping to check out what's going on there. And they decide to have a picnic. And the reason they're kind of lingering, though, is the mother is trying to decide how to tell her daughter that she has terminal cancer. And so the real narrative that's going on here is a mother-daughter story where the mother has to confront her daughter with some of the darker and more terrible truths of life. And in the process, I can bounce that off this premise. And so, you have the self-repairing robot. And so that immediately starts to bring some potential ramifications or metaphorical readings concerning, the human body and the immune system. It's constantly repairing what's around it. And she's trying to preserve her relationship with her child. And so by presenting this fantastical premise and then asking, what does that mean in the context of a really simple, basic human narrative? I then found myself able to create what I felt was a compelling short story. And it did pretty well. It ended up in a really, really, a magazine I love, at least, called Utopia Science Fiction. And it was selected for their 5-year best of anthology. And
Cool.
it's one of those that when people ask me of, what I think is representative of what I want to do in my short fiction, I kind of hold that one up. But yeah, if I had to, that's probably the best answer I think I can give to that question.
I think it was a hell of an answer. Well done. All right. Time is getting short once again. You're going to be at Books and Brews August 3rd, 2024 at Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston. Have you been to Chicago before?
No. Well, okay, let me qualify that. I drove through there once when I was like 9.
Sure.
Uh,
There's a lot different
so
than coming as an adult and like spending a weekend or whatever.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay. So
I
then
don't.
go ahead
Oh,
because I have a
yeah, I
legit
don't.
question for you.
Yeah, I don't count it as having been there unless I've stayed the night there intentionally.
So that brings me to my question. You're going to be in Chicagoland. What are you most wanting to see or do?
So there's 3 things that are priorities aside from Books and Brews, because I'm not going to lie, I'm hugely excited about it. One thing that I'm really looking forward to is Duncan Ralston's going to be there. Um, Another author named John Cohn is going to be there, and together Ralston and Cohn made the Ghostland board game, and they're going to be bringing a
Oh,
prototype of the Ghostland board game to Books and Brews. And holy shit, I am hoping to play it with the designer and the author. That said, though, no, I really want to have some high quality pizza. I think that goes without saying. Anybody who goes to Chicago without wanting pizza deserves to probably be shot and buried somewhere.
well, that
Um,
might be extreme, but I think if they get the wrong one and like it, then they might deserve that.
that's fair. That's 100% fair. But no, I actually got my family's coming with me. And so while they won't be with me at Books and Brews for more than a few minutes, we are taking a couple extra days for travel. And I really want
Fun.
to see the Museum of Illusions, and I
Yeah, yeah,
really want
yeah.
to see the planetarium.
Very
I'm a
cool.
huge fan of both of those things.
Very cool. How old? You said you have kids?
Yeah, my daughter's 11 and my son is 8.
Museum of Science and Industry. Trust me.
Ooh, okay.
Trust me. It's not far from the planetarium. We that is the one that every year when my daughter was little, we did. And the kids are going to love it. You're going to love it. There's so much cool stuff going on there. That is a perfect family experience day with lots of science and fun. So,
And our whole family is all about science. Actually, this is really funny. So my daughter, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I think it's hilarious. So she's got a crush on this boy who is in the gifted program with her, and they exchange phone numbers at the end of the year so that they can keep in contact over the
sure.
summer. And while we were driving back from a reading I did at Louisville, we finished listening to Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir.
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation about the science of it because they're really interested in science, but of course there's some pretty challenging science for a kid in that book. And so we were talking about things like relativity and quantum physics, and so we get home, and that conversation kind of continues for another day or so. And then just, I think it was 2 days ago, my daughter goes up to my wife and says, hey, can you call Aaron? I want to tell him about relativity. And so she calls this, she called the boy she has a crush on so she could talk about relativity and quantum physics. And so, yeah,
That's
that sounds
fantastic.
absolutely up our family's alley.
Oh, awesome. Well, I want to hear a follow-up after you go and you write me, you go, oh my God, Rob, you were right. It was awesome. And you were right to tell me to eat at Lou Malnati's Pizza, because that's the best pizza in Chicago for my
Which
money.
one's that?
Lou Malnati's.
I think that may actually be the plan for the Books and Brews pizza party.
As it should
That's
be. I'll talk to
one of the
Tiffany and
two
make sure it
names.
is. Because that's the place. That's my favorite one. If I stood up, I could show you Body by Lou Malnati's. It's probably at one point, I think I was probably 70% Lou's. So, okay, wonderful. Well, everybody, I encourage you to go to Books and Brews. I know I'm saying that on each one of these shows, but go and meet Andrew. Go lobby for him to get to play Ghostland, and find out if he went to the museum and if he liked Lou's, or if he's, yeah, we ended up at Pizza Hut. We'll have problems. You and I'll have problems if that's the case. Andrew, it was great meeting you. I cannot wait to read these books. Mobius Door is the one I got to start with, though, because you have lit my brain on fire with that. This was really wonderful. And thank you. I will put in the show notes your social media, places people can engage with you. They can buy your books. Everybody, make sure that you subscribe to his newsletter. Make sure that you follow him and that you engage. Share it with your friends. Let people know about his cool books and what he's got going on out there. Let's sell some books. It would really help me out if you would rate and review this show on whatever platform you use to listen to this podcast. Good reviews help others find the show, which ultimately helps the people I've interviewed get more exposure. You can connect with me on social media or via email. All the links are found in the show notes. If you like this show, you'll like other shows from Southgate Media Group as well, such as Read Between the Lines, a podcast featuring insightful interviews with some of the hottest authors out there, or Go Fund This, a podcast where we interview people about their amazing crowdfunding projects. You can find our shows wherever you listen to podcasts, so give them a try. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate and review our shows. It really helps other people find them and keep our team inspired. Alley Chats is a production of Southgate Media Group, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Rob Southgate. Thanks again for listening to Alley Chats. After working with creatives for the last 11 years, I've heard one statement more than any other. I hate marketing. I get it. It can be painful trying to figure out how to market your book or movie or comic. When I started podcasting, I had no clue how to do any of it. I was afraid of doing it wrong, looking like an idiot or making a marketing mistake that I could not recover from. It can be paralyzing. Sound familiar? If it does, let me see if I can help you. I got my MBA in marketing, so you don't have to. Sign up for a free session today to talk about your marketing goals and to see if we're a good fit. If nothing else, you'll get some insights that might ease your mind. Go to southgatesmallbusiness.com and sign up for a free session today.